I never imagined my marriage would end inside a bitter courtroom. My wife had spent months setting traps to make me look like a cheater, all so she could divorce me and take everything. But I knew the truth about her late nights with her CEO. When her lawyer stood up and claimed their time together was strictly business, I almost laughed out loud. I held the evidence tightly in my hand, knowing it was my only shot at saving myself. But when the judge saw what was really on that tape, the entire room went completely dead silent. The autumn wind bit at Mark Johnson's face as he approached the looming county courthouse. He paused at the bottom of the concrete steps to adjust his tie, ensuring he looked presentable for the battle ahead. Passers-by rushed past him, unaware of the turmoil about to unfold inside. He took a deep breath to steady his shaking hands before beginning the long climb upward. Today was the day he would finally fight back against the lies. Mark reached the top of the stairs and tightened his grip on the worn leather handle of his briefcase. Inside lay the digital evidence that served as his only shield against financial ruin. He felt the weight of the hard drive through the bag's material, a physical reminder of what was at stake. Security guards at the entrance motioned for him to step through the metal detectors. He placed the briefcase on the conveyor belt with extreme care. Once through security, Mark spotted a familiar figure standing near the courtroom entrance. Sarah stood stiffly beside her high-priced lawyer, whispering something into his ear with a frantic energy. She kept her back turned to Mark, clearly refusing to make any form of eye contact with him. Her avoidance only confirmed his suspicions about her guilt and nervousness. He walked past them without saying a word, focusing solely on the heavy wooden doors ahead. The heavy doors creaked open, revealing the sterile and intimidating atmosphere of the courtroom. Mark walked down the center aisle and settled into the defendant's chair on the right side. Sarah and her legal team entered moments later, taking their places on the opposing side. The distance between their tables felt like a canyon, separating two lives that were once intertwined. Mark arranged his papers on the desk, preparing for the first strike. A side door opened near the bench, bringing the murmurs in the gallery to an abrupt halt. Judge Harrison entered the room with a stern expression, his black robes billowing slightly around him. Everyone in the room stood up in unison out of respect for the court. The judge took his seat and immediately slammed his gavel down to signal the session's start. He peered over his glasses, scanning the faces of both parties before him. Sarah's lawyer wasted no time and stood up to address the court first. He adjusted his suit jacket and began a rehearsed speech about the sanctity of marriage and betrayal. He claimed that Mark had engaged in infidelity during the previous month, destroying the foundation of their union. Mark clenched his jaw as he listened to the man spin a web of lies. The lawyer promised to provide irrefutable proof of these alleged late-night encounters. The attorney walked toward the bench and placed a manila envelope in front of the judge. He pulled out several grainy photographs and fanned them out for the court to see. The images depicted Mark sitting alone at a dimly lit hotel bar, looking somewhat disheveled. Sarah's lawyer pointed to a woman in the background of one photo, implying a connection that did not exist. The judge picked up the photos to examine them more closely. Mark watched silently from his seat, recognizing the location in the photographs immediately. He remembered that night clearly because Sarah had practically forced him to go there to meet a potential client. She had been adamant that he wait at the bar for someone who never actually showed up. Now, seeing the photos, he realized it had been a setup from the very beginning. The lawyer continued to twist the narrative of that lonely evening. To strengthen their fabricated case, the opposing counsel called a witness to the stand. A man Mark had never seen before walked up and swore to tell the truth. The witness claimed he was a bartender who saw Mark leave the hotel with a mystery woman that night. Mark shook his head in disbelief at the blatant dishonesty occurring right in front of him. The witness avoided looking at the defense table while answering questions. Sarah played the part of the heartbroken victim perfectly for the audience. She dabbled at her eyes with a tissue and wiped a stray tear from her cheek. The judge observed her emotional display and began taking detailed notes on the testimony presented. The courtroom remained quiet, the weight of the accusations hanging heavy in the air. Mark knew the judge was forming an opinion based on these orchestrated lies. It was finally time for the defense to present their side of the story. Mark's attorney stood up calmly and addressed the judge with a steady voice. He requested permission to submit a digital video file into evidence, stating it was critical to the case. He explained that the footage had been retrieved directly from a security camera inside Sarah's private office. The judge nodded and granted permission for the video to be shown. A large monitor was wheeled into the center of the room for everyone to see. The screen flickered to life with a static hum before resolving into a clear image. Every person in the courtroom leaned forward, their eyes fixed on the glowing display. The timestamp in the corner indicated the recording was from just 2 weeks prior. Mark glanced at Sarah, who suddenly looked very pale under the fluorescent lights. The video began to play, showing the interior of Sarah's office late at night. She stood by a cabinet and poured 2 glasses of scotch with a relaxed demeanor. David, her company's CEO, sat comfortably in the guest chair across from her desk. At first glance, the interaction appeared to be nothing more than colleagues having a drink after hours. Sarah's shoulders seemed to relax slightly as the innocent scene played out. Sarah's lawyer immediately jumped up to object, trying to cut the viewing short. He argued loudly that the footage only showed a standard professional meeting between coworkers. He insisted that the court should focus on the earlier photos of Mark, whom he labeled the true adulterer. He claimed this video was irrelevant and a desperate attempt to distract from Mark's indiscretions. The judge raised a hand to silence the lawyer's outburst. The judge pressed a button to pause the video, freezing the image on the screen. He turned to Mark's attorney, demanding an explanation for the relevance of this specific meeting. Sarah used the interruption to point an accusing finger at Mark, whispering loudly to her counsel. She tried to maintain her facade of outrage, but her hand trembled visibly. Mark's lawyer remained calm, preparing to deliver the context that would change everything. Mark leaned over and whispered something urgent into his attorney's ear. He pointed specifically at the timestamp displayed on the paused video frame. The time coincided exactly with when Sarah had claimed to be at a charity event. His lawyer listened intently, realizing the significance of the discrepancy Mark had noticed. This small detail was the key to unlocking the truth. The attorney straightened up and nodded slowly at his client. He turned back to the bench and addressed the judge with renewed confidence. He stated that the true nature of the meeting would become clear if the video continued. He formally asked for permission to play the remaining unedited footage without any further interruptions. The judge considered the request for a moment before nodding his assent. A wave of visible panic washed over Sarah as the judge allowed the playback to resume. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, smoothing her skirt with nervous hands. Her eyes darted toward the public gallery, locking onto David, who was sitting in the back row. They exchanged a brief, worried glance that screamed of guilt and apprehension. It was clear they had not expected this part of the recording to surface. Sarah's lawyer attempted to voice another objection, citing privacy concerns for the third party involved. The judge, however, had seen enough evasion and overruled the objection firmly. He signaled for the court clerk to resume the playback immediately. The room fell into a tense silence as everyone waited to see what would happen next on the screen. Mark felt a surge of adrenaline as the video began to move again. The static cleared, and the scene in the office continued to unfold. Mark leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms over his chest. He knew exactly what was coming, having watched the footage countless times before. He looked over at Sarah, who was now staring down at her lap, unable to watch. The truth was finally out of his hands and on display for the world to see. The professional atmosphere in the video evaporated in an instant. Sarah and David moved from their chairs to the leather couch in the corner of the office. The footage left nothing to the imagination as they began having sex immediately. Gasps erupted from the gallery as the business meeting turned into an explicit affair. The judge's eyes widened as he watched the scene that completely destroyed Sarah's previous testimony. As the physical act ended, the audio picked up their conversation with crystal clarity. They openly discussed the conspiracy to frame Mark for adultery to secure a favorable divorce settlement. Sarah laughed about the trap she set at the hotel, detailing how she hired the woman in the photos. David bragged about how they would spend Mark's assets once the divorce was finalized. Their words sealed their fate. The audio of their plotting echoed through the speakers, filling every corner of the room. The entire courtroom fell completely silent, stunned by the malice in their voices. Even the court stenographer stopped typing for a moment, shocked by the revelation. Sarah's lawyer slumped in his chair, realizing his case had just disintegrated. The silence was heavier than any shout could have been. Humiliation washed over Sarah, and she covered her face with her hands to hide from the staring eyes. In the back of the room, David realized his career and reputation were ruined. He stood up abruptly and quickly rushed out of the courtroom doors, ignoring the bailiff's call to stop. His hasty exit only served as a final admission of guilt. Sarah was left alone to face the consequences. The judge turned off the monitor and looked down at Sarah with a stern, unforgiving expression. He stated that her previous claims were not only dismissed but were a mockery of the court. He ordered an immediate investigation into her conduct and the conspiracy revealed on the tape. Mark stood up, finally free from the web of lies she had spun. He walked out of the courtroom, ready to start his life over.